to all the dispossessed youth of Africa, for perpetuation of communion with ancestral spirits through the fight for African freedom, and in the firm faith that the dead, the living, and the unborn will unite to build the destroyed shrines. Selah. Hello and welcome, beloveds, to another episode of Wake Up Africa. My name is Dr. Mumbi Saraki. How you doing? How's everything going? I really do pray that you are well in all your ways and that you're moving into living life truly on your own terms. Really want to thank every single person that supports us on Patreon and just the awesome spiritual community that we have on there, and every single person that sends us love donations through PayPal. We appreciate love, each and every one of you. We do have a special gift that we've been sending to all our supporters, so make sure you check the mail. If you don't get it, it's coming soon. It's very interesting when you really start to look at how everything has happened, how the oppressor has operated, how Babylon created this matrix. And you realize it's so simple, yes, yet it's so complex, because they figured out some of the keys. They didn't get the secrets and the powers, but they figured out the keys that, the original architects had used to create this world. And they used those keys to totally mash us up. And they're just operating, the majority of their programming is operating on the first law, first hermetic principle or whatever. I highly recommend the Kybalion if you haven't read it. Is it Kybalion? Whatever. It talks about the 7 hermetic principles. That's a good place to start. Also, the negative statements of Ma'at is a very good place to start, and etc. etc. I'll definitely be getting into that more, but I think it's important for us to recognize, once you recognize a problem, then that's almost like 60% of solving it. The biggest step is understanding what went on, and then the remedies and solutions just come naturally by themselves, because we're solution-oriented, peoples. And so if we realize that the world is mental and that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that most of the experience is created in the unseen world before we experience it in the seen world, then we should understand that we weren't defeated physically by armies and bombs and germs, and there's a really good book called Guns, Germs, and Steel that you should check out about how Africa was penetrated by the Mzungu. But that wasn't it, beloveds. By the time you were seeing that physically, much had already been taken place, spiritually and mentally. And they disenfranchised us just in naming and language, beloveds, and in the spells behind that. Because you see, they came to Africa for us. The curriculum that many of the African children, at least on the East African side, maybe I should even say Kenya, but I know the majority of African countries have not changed their curriculum for their education. In many, many, many years, we have not come up with our own system. That's only happening in private schools. But for the majority of our children in public education on the African continent, they are literally being taught to be slaves. They're literally being dumbed down. And, and it's really important, because we were disenfranchised by names and by accepting certain narratives. Certain narratives the narratives were raped into us. They were beaten into us. They were hot ironed into us, just as our brothers and sisters on the American continent were being, enslaved. We were busy being colonized, which is another form of slavery. And one of the biggest ways that they disenfranchised us was to reduce us to tribes. And the word tribe is very, very derogatory, because the word tribe is more of a Muzungu concept, beloveds. It's more how they were set up. It's like a clan of families that came together and just grew from there. We were never tribes. And I think the fact that we've clung to this word of tribe has really reduced us from who we are, and we don't see ourselves in the right perspective. I mean, little words like this can mash us up, beloveds. Because a tribe is like a clan. It's like people who have gathered in a forest. That's what they wanted to tell us. That's what a lot of us learned. That's why I brought up the education thing, by the way, because I was saying, in In schools, you're taught how we were in the forest, we didn't have much, and then the Muzungu came and literally, civilized us. When everything he's introduced to our system is slowly like breaking us down. From the beds we sit on, sleep on, the chairs we sit on, beloveds, the diet we've adopted. Everything is just slowly mashing us up. The clothes we wear, the underwear and the bra that cause women so many issues. Like all of these, beloveds, all of these that we take to be luxury items, actually go to mash us up. And so we have to recognize the importance of naming and accepting certain names and embodying certain names, how it reduces us. We were never tribes. We were never a group of clan members, family members that just came and slept together and the clan grew. Like it's just a group of clans. A tribe is the lowest level. We were nations. If you look at any nation across the continent, they had their social order, they had their laws, they had their spiritual practices, they had their god, they had their barter trade, the way they traded with one another. I mean, sometimes there was such an abundance that there was no real intertrade, but like with other nations. And you see, I think if we looked at ourselves as nations, we also understand, and understand the damage that was done to the continent, beloveds, to the mothership, to the motherland. The fact that they took 47, is it 42 or 47 in Kenya, for example? They took 40 something nations, carved up a pen, like a cattle pen, put us inside, then, changed up the narrative where we were told we were each tribes. And in fact, we were really down there. We didn't have a system. And what happened is like, they didn't, the way they changed the narrative is through education, beloveds. And that's why they separated the child from the home. So the natural education and advancement and upliftment that would happen, because many of us would become apprentice, of the bloodlines or the gifts that we came carrying in, of the work that we would do, and we learned, and it was just so much deeper than what they made it seem. But they made it seem like the child wasn't doing anything. The child was just at home, or the child was being forced to engage in child labor, and so they took the child from the parents at a young age, and now they're doing it even younger. I think now it's even reached like 3, where you can take your child to like the pre-kindergarten. Or is it 2? And so they took the child, and then they started to tell the child, your parents are backwards. We're the ones who have civilized you. And they started to talk about their great conquests and how they came and how they, healed the people and did this and did that. And while they were doing that, they totally made it like a crime to even speak your language in class. And if you speak to some of like our mother's generation, they'll tell you, like, if you spoke, Kikuyu or Kiswahili in class here in Kenya, you'd be beaten, you'd be punished. So it was like our culture was beaten out of, either the generation and the generation before us. And they didn't accept it lying down either. But it was all this thing of like, they created this resentment between the children and the parents. So the children started looking down on the parents. And the children then became disconnected. The spirit even got disconnected from the children. Where the children now started to, they started to totally, they didn't value the ancient knowledge that their parents carried. They didn't value the medicinal practices, Then they started to rush to hospitals to get the Panadol and the this and the that, instead of relying on the herbal medicines, because, Christianity and education had made them believe that their medicine men and women were witch doctors and they were wicked and they were evil. And people still think like that till today. So it shows you how much damage has been done, beloveds. But it's all because we were reduced to the most basic level of a tribe. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, Africa.
Welcome back, beloveds, to another episode of Wake Up Africa. You know, reclaiming our inheritance, beloveds, is not a physical thing. It's more of a mental thing of getting your mind right and positioning yourself to, to claim your inheritance. And this is a time where, seriously, the Spirit is pouring out. There is so much power that is accessible to those that are doing the necessary inner work. And you always have to ask, can the ancient ones trust you? Can the ancestors trust you? Can some of the great kings and queens that have lived and gods and goddesses that have dwelt on this earth, can they trust you? Because their spirit continues to rule. Their spirit is still here. Even if it's been dormant, that spirit can still be put inside of you. And the inner work means overstanding the lies that you've been told. And, my recent video that I did on, Adam came from Eve just showed me the level of religious psychosis. And it's actually heartbreaking to see how many people just aren't ready. And that's fine. They'll be ready in the next cycle. But the cycle, the cycle they're on is spiraling down. Whereas the new earth is spiraling up and expanding. The spiral down gets darker and closer and closer and closer and closer together. And so even though there will be a future crossroads, it's really sad to see that some are just missing it based on their stubbornness and their ego and, just all the things that their mind was booby-trapped by Babylon. But the thing about calling us tribes has always kept us from seeing ourselves in the correct perspective, beloveds. The fact that we are nations, we were kingdoms, we were queendoms, we had vast territories. And that's another thing about this name, tribe versus nation. You see, because Babylon always talks about themselves as kingdoms. And they never ever talk about themselves as tribes when they're the tribes and we're the kingdoms. Because you see, the word kingdom alone means that you have land, you have territory that is yours. The word tribes almost means like you're squatting somewhere and you don't even know yourself and you're totally confused. And so that's how we were almost disinherited from our land, beloveds. Because if you accept the title tribes, then the land doesn't belong to anyone, because these are just a group of people who are almost barbaric that have come together and are just trying to survive. But, the truth is we were kingdoms and nations and queendoms. And the fact that that was taken away from us made it seem like Africa was just this vast land that was not occupied, because it was occupied by tribes. No, it was not occupied by tribes. It was occupied by kingdoms and mighty nations. Mighty nations that had traveled all over the world and seeded every part of the planet with the melanated gene. Created kingdoms all over. Even a lot of the mighty European castles and everything were built by people that look like you and I. In their bid to civilize the world. Maybe that's where our people went wrong. But, accepting certain titles disenfranchises you. Because Babylon was like, yeah, we went and found tribes. They used to write these Columbus, one of the greatest liars ever. They'd write back and say, yeah, we found some wild tribes in the trees, in the forest, etc., etc. And, we found this land that's not occupied, and the land would be taken over. It would become private property, etc., etc. So it started so subtle, beloveds. But look where it's brought us now. Look at the mass confusion that so many of our people are in. And it's so funny because the people who are in the real confusion are the ones who are still arguing and debating. The people who are totally clear are moving. Things are happening in their lives. Signs and wonders and miracles are manifesting. Amazing power is entering and penetrating their lives and helping them to propel forward, because they have the right perspective of who they are, who their ancestors were, beloveds. And that's where all of us have to get on. Because if we realize that it was kingdoms that were colonized by the spells that were cast in 1884 at the, Berlin Conference, they didn't just meet and cut up Africa like this. It was an intense, they sent the Masons at the same time that they sent the freaking, missionaries, beloveds. They put a grid over, but a lot of it is because it's by our consent. Because we think it's so subtle. Like, so what if they call us tribes and not nations? Like, we think these things are so unimportant, but they're everything. And if we realized that we were kingdoms, and we would realize that there were territories that were ours that people just came and took over, like we didn't even exist. We will realize, hey, I can't even speak, beloveds. I'm so emotional about this. Because you see, the conquest happened here first. They overlaid their matrix, beloveds. And our liberation has to take that blanket off of ourselves and of Africa so that we can see ourselves in our true light and our true glory. And so we should stop accepting these demeaning names like tribe. For real, the sun is just shining so bright at the foothills of Mount Zion. But if you start to recognize that kingdoms were mashed up and put together and mixed up, then they start to try to say the Bantu migration started from the West when it started from, Egypt. And then people will actually be like, give us references of who? Babylon? I mean, get it together, beloveds. You have to be spiritually high enough now to know what is truth and what is not. And to be able to go and do the research for yourself. If the thing triggers you enough, get off your lazy ass and go research it and see if it's true or not for you. And see where your spirit guides lead you. You see, Babylon has weakened you because they've spoon-fed you everything. They've spoon-fed you addictions. They've spoon-fed you love, things that they told you were lovely. But they've also spoon-fed you so many lies. They've been like, oh, don't work. Well, don't clean your house and do this and do that. We'll get you washing machines and we'll get this and we'll get that. Don't communicate telepathically. We'll give you a mobile phone that is so toxic and is just, constantly eating from you. They've created a convenient lifestyle to our detriment because people don't even think for themselves anymore. Whatever tribe you're from, it's not a tribe, it's a nation, it's a kingdom. It had its systems, it has its society, it had its social order. Everything you see in the Babylon matrix, your nation had. Education, social system, health services, in our own way. Telecommunication services, more like psychic communication services. Everything was copy-pasted, is a bad replica of our nations and our kingdoms. Babylon has snatched our identity, beloved. That's what many people need to understand. And I'll totally do a separate show on that. But seriously, we need to go beyond tribes and look at ourselves as kingdoms, as nations, because now when you understand that you're a kingdom and a nation, you can now start to look at what did your nation believe? What did your peoples believe? And then you can trace back the mighty nations like the Bantu. Bantu is basically the people. And there's a lot of really nice news shows talking about, the Bantu, who many say are the Hebrews. I mean, it's just the people, the original people. And it's so amazing now to see our own narratives. Because everything you've been told is a lie, beloveds. And the quicker you realize that, the better it is for all of us. Tuko pamoja.